This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I am here with John Wurdeman of Pheasant's Tears in Georgia. Now, what the fuck are you doing in Georgia? A young man from New Mexico.
Searching for reality.
Now, you told me a story about coming here as a painter and then suddenly discovering wine.
Yeah, that's how it happened. I heard about Georgia first because of its extraordinary polyphony, its ancient polyphonic songs. I bought a house here because it was a beautiful place to paint and thought I would spend my time collecting ancient Georgian polyphony. I was just totally mesmerized by this ancient culture that had not been very much understood or explored yet, and was very interested in world music and different world music traditions. And then thought I'd spend, just most of my time painting, and that was pretty much the case until 2006 when I ran into fate or serendipity or circumstances.
You're painting in a vineyard.
I was painting in a vineyard, and my friend Gela Patalishvili, now friend and partner, then I didn't know him, and drove by in a tractor and invited me to his home for dinner. And I didn't really know him at all, and I had to go to the village that he named and trace his last name. When I arrived, there was a humble Kahetian village family, and they laid out the traditional, very generous hospitality that Kahetians would always do. And during the meal and during the toast, at a certain point, Gila broke down in tears, saying that the ancient way of making wine using the original varietals is slowly dying out, and that his ancestors and forefathers, they died for this. This is it was their life, and it was what they were willing to sacrifice themselves for. And he really didn't want to see so many wines that were traveling from Georgia that weren't carrying a Georgian passport, and asked me if I would somehow help him make a winery where we used only traditional methods, only traditional farming techniques, and only the traditional varietals. And Gela's sincerity and his passion touched me, and being an artist, I was a man of humble means, but we started this crazy project together just a few years back.
What makes Georgian wine so special for you?
I'd say that there's a common denominator between the music, between the cuisine, between family structure, the spirituality, and the wine. It all has something deep, earthy, and resonating. And I'd say that common denominator kind of definitely spans across all of Georgia. But for me, it's a place more than anything where you cry all of your tears and laugh all of your laughs. But it's not a place where plasticity or artificial walls are tolerated. In Georgia, people want very real relationships and very real contact. And when a person is trying wine, they look at how alive is it? How real is it? Does it express the place? Is it true to the varietal nature? And all of this would have been just simple common etiquette in any European country, 200 years ago or 150 years ago, maybe even 60 years ago. But unfortunately, for me personally, the wine world kind of went through a process of homogenization, and these handful of small lights throughout the world where there's a living culture. The most interesting thing about Georgia is not how ancient the wine culture it is, but that it never stopped, that it's unbroken. It's an unbroken living chain, despite a very fiercely difficult history.
What would you say to those who rubbish the idea of natural wine, the biggest critics of it, those who believe that although it comes from these ancient traditions, modern technology has advanced to such a point that one can make wines without having certain, I guess, natural faults?
My personal opinion is that you can have it's like with anything, with food, anything that you're going to take into your body, maybe with life in general, the greater metaphor that you can have a yogurt that is incredibly alive with probiotics, or you can have something that's pumped with pectin and gelatin and this kind of Greek yogurt craze. There's wine that is, when you taste it in your mouth, that it's full and alive and celebrating, where some wines are like street dogs that are scared when you approach them because they've been beaten back so much. And you have to, in my opinion, anyone that really follows their heart, their conscience, their intuition, they're going to be an honest appraiser of a wine. That is there a sense of place? Does it have character? Does it speak of the place it comes from? And the less you intervene, the more there is of nature. The more you intervene, the more there is of the ego, or the knowledge, or the lack of it, of the winemaker. And to me it's quite simple. If you take a cow and it's pasturing in a beautiful meadow that's very natural and there's a rich variety of flowers and grass, then the cheese is going to be richer. If you have rich flora and fauna in your vineyard, and if you farm with a light hand and really let there be established a natural balance, and that balance will be carried into the wine itself. And there's no magicianry here, there's no sorcery. In my opinion, very few people would follow this philosophy that are truly faithful to it for commercial reasons. This is a way of life. You do it because you can't live any other way.
And yet you do use sulfur in your wines, and some of the natural wine zealots would be very dogmatic and say you shouldn't be using sulfur in your wine.
Well, if we look that sulfur is a natural occurring process of alcoholic fermentation, then it's going to be there in most wines regardless whether you want it or not. And sulfur has been used for thousands of years, and sulfur is also a natural element. And I'm not a fan of what I would call sulfured wines, wines that have overdone it, but adding a milligram or a milligram and a half not only helps you sleep well, it also helps
save your wine in some manners.
Yeah, it can keep the wine actually more focused and together, and it can also make sure that your importers and the restaurateurs that are going to take your wine abroad can really serve it with pride and giving it due credit. And I certainly think that a perfect wine would be a wine with zero sulfur, and yet perfection.
In your mind, a perfect wine would be a wine with zero sulfur.
In my wine, a perfect wine, some of the very finest wine experiences I've had have been wines, either my own or friends, where we just scooped it right out of the qvevri before bottling, and it's just celebrating life. It's absolutely on fire, with life. And at the same time, I know that once it hits the ship and the container goes across the ocean and arrives in the ports in Manhattan, it's going to have difficulties. So the idea is, how much? Do you give it that just kind of minimal amount of help to push it over, or do you give it nothing at all? We're starting to experiment with our 2012 vintage, and we're going to do some qvevri with none at all. We're going to send some of it to different countries and see how it goes, but it is a huge risk, and I think sometimes a minimal amount of sulfur in serving the end consumer a really fine, balanced, together, focused wine is more important than any dogma.
Well, thank you very much for joining us at Good Food Revolution today. We really appreciate your time because I know you're a very busy man. We hope to see you in Toronto soon.
My pleasure and honor. Cheers.